You guys stay. Don't move. Stay, sit, 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 stay, stay. High five, high five, high five. Good dog. Shake. Good. Stay. Speak. Good dog. Stay, Vita. Sit. Sit. Paul. Oh, she gets so excited. Stay. Other one. Other one. Good. No. No, no, no. No. Paul. Other one. Give me your paw. Good girl. Stay. Sit. No, sit. Speak. Sit. Good girl. Go eat. You guys are a mess. Come here. Good girl. Good dog. Tell them hi. Say hi, everybody. Where are you going? Where are you going? What's the matter? You want to hang out in the shop? Hey, what's up, Speedy's Garage gang? Welcome back to Speedy's Garage. We've been on kind of a roll with the shop build series. We're going to continue that this week with electrical. But first, let's go check and see what questions you had from last week's video. All right, so let's get to those questions. Tonight, we've got a lot to talk about with electrical, so I'm going to have to go through them fast, so bear with me. Brian Jones says, are you located in tornado country, and if so, what precautions have you built into the shop for tornadoes? I'm actually not in tornado country. We only see a couple of times a year when that's even possible. Now, that doesn't mean we don't get tornadoes here. We have had them occasionally, but codes usually dictate what's required for a structure, and there wasn't anything specific required for this structure to account for tornadoes, just like there wasn't for the house. So the shop was built to the same standard that the house was built to. Corey Suttle says, it may have already been answered, but how thick does the floor need to be to support a 2 or 4 post lift? Great channel and awesome video series. Thanks, Corey. The answer is whatever the manufacturer of your lift requires. For the bin pack that I was looking for this shop, they required 4-inch thick, 3,500 PSI concrete. We upgraded that to 8-inch thick, 4,500 PSI concrete where the lift post would be. Frank Lyle says, your concrete guy is correct. All concrete will eventually crack. The epoxy might bridge small gaps and hide them, but a large crack will break through the epoxy. Fiber and rebar welded wire fabric help, but don't completely eliminate the cracks. His question, how's the mini split system working from a humidity control standpoint? I know they work for heating and cooling, just wondering how well they control humidity. Loving the series. Thanks, Frank. The answer to your question is it does awesome controlling humidity. It actually has a setting just for humidity control. If you don't want to heat or cool the shop, I can just hit a humidity button and it will actually lower the humidity in the shop just on that one setting. Weekend Climber says, love all the details that you're talking about. Being organized like that, I'm sure really helps the contractor. Can't wait to see the electrical go in. When's the next 400 video? You should SAS, which means solid axle swap that sucker. You know, I might do that eventually. That's a pretty big job. I'd have to learn to weld to do some of that. Thanks, Weekend Climber, for the comment. Aldolfo Gonzalez says, thanks for your videos and the details. Keep making them. Hope to do something small scale for my garage. Not enough land in New Jersey to do what you did. I get it. Up north and probably out west, land becomes a challenge and real estate is very expensive. So good luck. NHRA 7110 says, great as always. That's all the comments for this week. Let's get right to the electrical. Okay, with the questions answered, let's just jump right into it. So when you get to electrical, that's a spot where you're gonna really wanna pay attention and make sure that you get things laid out exactly like you want them. For example, think about when you're coming into your shop, where do you want your wall plate to be? Now, obviously we've got this one lined out. We did a 5-gang, which is kind of unique, but I didn't wanna have multiple switch panels on the wall, and so we special ordered the 5-gang boxes and the stainless steel plates. Now the plates and stuff, we'll get into all of that when it comes to finishing. For now, we're just going to focus on just the electrical, but the reason there's 5 in here is because the first one lights the front half of the shop on the ceiling lights. The second one lights the back half of the shop. The third one lights the outdoor door light. The fourth one lights the can lights. And the 5th one lights the attic light. I actually put a light or some lights in the attic, so at night if I was ever up there, and you'll notice some of these switches are illuminated. And again, we'll talk about the switches and stuff when we get to finishing. Right now we're just going to focus on the electrical, but I had 5 switches ran to just this one box. And then we did the same thing pretty much back here in the back of the shop. And so I did a 5-gang switch plate and switch box. You can see here. And it's pretty much matches up to the front one. The first switch is a three-way back to the front of the shop, so I can turn the shop lights on or off from either end of the shop. And that was a recommendation from a friend of mine, and it has saved me a ton of walking. So this switch operates the front half of the shop lights. This switch operates the back half of the shop lights. This operates the fan inside the compressor closet to cool the compressor down if I need to. This is the light for the light fan combo, and I did those on separate switches because I might want to run the fan without the light because the door might be closed and I'm just literally turning that on to pull some cool air in to cool the compressor down. This one actually illuminates when it's on. Again, we'll talk about that later, but that is to run the light on the light fan combo. And then this one also illuminates, and that's a large 30 amp switch tied to the plug inside the closet, and that is to turn it on and off the air compressor. I want to be able to do that without having to actually open the compressor closet. So again, I was very specific on how I wanted these wired, exactly what I wanted to go to each switch, and I left the electrician some notes, and I'll show you that now, how we laid it out. And I actually numbered them 1 through 5 and told him what I wanted each switch to actually do. Now this connection, or this plug in the compressor closet, is actually 30 amp service. I used like a dryer plug to connect that. A lot of people have said that's incorrect, and I think I mentioned this before. I think the concern is unplugging it while it's running, and it is a 5 horsepower motor, and so some folks have said that needs to be hardwired. I could probably change that out at some time, but I've been running it like this for 3 years and I haven't had any issues, so I'm not inclined to change it now. However, if I do ever have any issues, I will definitely update you guys and tell you what I did to fix it. But think about that. Think about where your boxes are going to be, and hopefully you can see that back there.
I'm unable to answer your
What the heck?
Try again later.
What in the world? Think about where you're going to put those wall socket plugs inside your closets if you do a compressor closet or like a bathroom or something. And there's the light fan combo. The box did go in as part of that, and I'll show you that now. That's kind of what it looked like before we had the actual cover and light installed, but there's a vent that goes to the outside, and you can hear the fan and the light, like I said, are on separate switches. And in the restroom, same deal. We've got light and fan, separate switches. And then because we did a grinder pump for the toilet, there was a plug installed for that as well. So make sure you think of everything. If we had forgotten that, it'd have been a pain in the butt, and I probably wouldn't have had running water out here in the bathroom. And when it came to areas I knew I was going to have a workbench or something, I doubled up on the plugs. So I did 2 gang quad plugs. You know, some of them are GFCI. I did that on each end because I knew around the workbench I was going to, have a laptop connected up, charging lights. This end, all the tool chargers are on here, and or the battery chargers rather. And if I ended up using all of these up, I have the option to just plug in a power strip and mount it to the wall, and then I've got a whole bunch of plugs I could actually expand to if I needed. And you'll notice the height too. I set them, kind of countertop or bar height, I think is what that's called, about 42 inches off the ground. And so I did that specifically because I want them high off the ground and not low like you would see inside like a normal house or something, since this was going to be, shop area. Now, one other thing is think about plugs that you might want to have in the ceiling. Hopefully you can see that one up there. I talked about this a little bit last time. I thought at some point I might need task lighting, where we might have a 4-foot LED or some kind of light like that hanging from a chain, and you can operate it 2 ways. You can use a pull chain or something like that, but I went ahead and had them wire the plug up there to that switch right here. So hopefully you can see that, and that's how that gets power on and off. And I did the exact same kind of setup around the sink area over here. We did the 2 gang plugs, so we got plenty of plugs over here around the sink and the work area. And again, I thought I'm gonna be over here working, or Miss Speedy might. We've got a plug in the ceiling up there that is operated by a switch here. So if we ever want to put a task light directly over the sink, we would have one. On this particular setup, we ended up putting a shelf in to give us some workspace. And then I found these little LED lights, if I can find the switch. And we actually like those better because they were a little bit cleaner install. And she's able to have these right here where she's working. So that's kind of how we solve that. They're linked together. And I use this, tubing to kind of hide them all and everything. But we'll talk about some of this when we get the lighting. But they just come down and plug in to some of the plugs that were already in place. And now at this point, you need to really kind of have a very good idea of what your lighting setup is going to be. But you don't have to have the exact locations dialed in just yet. So I knew I was going to have 12 lights. I had done some calculations and I found an online kind of modeling system. And I'll talk about that when we get to lighting, which will be coming up pretty quick. and it basically allowed me to put in the light manufacturer, the actual fixture, the type of diffuser it would have, the number of bulbs and the type of bulb, and it would actually allow you to put in the foot candle. That's how it's measured. That's the brightness to your eye. The foot candle off the floor, the working surface we'll call it, and at that point it would tell you how many lights you were going to need. So based on that, I knew I was going to need about 12 lights. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You can see that's what we have. We have evens on one switch like I talked about before, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and then we have odds on the other switch, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. And so that's how I'm able to turn half the lights on or half the lights, off on any given section of the garage if I don't need full light. But you will need to have an idea of the quantity, because they're gonna have to know how many to run and to get back to your switches. And you'll see that they also put tape on the floor, so that's how the builder figured out which lights would be odd and which lights would be even. You can see there they kind of mapped it out with some painter's tape and numbered them so that when they wired them back to the switches they were correct. And then for the rest of the plugs, I just kind of spaced them out around the shop in an even fashion, and it meant that on the, we'll call it right hand side of the shop, there were 4 spaced out down the wall, and I did just single gang, so I figured that was enough plugs. I'd have pretty much a plug wherever I needed it. Obviously I used one for the refrigerator. I'm using some for the workbench, and that was going to be here. Had a extra for just whatever. Right now there's a cordless light plugged into it, and then down here on the end we have another, and those are think about cleaning something or using a vacuum or whatever for the car, using power tools or whatever that aren't cordless. Think about how many plugs you want. Now is the time to have the extra ones put in. I think the builder told me they gave me so many. Let's say they gave me 5 for the whole shop. Each one that I added was only about $7 a piece, and so I went kind of nuts with them and said I'm just going to put them everywhere to make sure I've never run out of a plug. And I haven't. I've worked out here 3 or 4 years, and I've never had an opportunity where I didn't have a plug available when I wanted one. On the left-hand side of the shop, there were 3. So you got one here, you got one there. Again, you'll see some of them are GFCI, and I think it basically, trying to remember what the electrician told me, I think 1 per circuit or something ends up being a GFCI plug. Because there's water out here, obviously. And so that's how we work those out. And the reason there's only 3 on the left-hand side of the shop is because we had the double plugs around the sink. And one of the things the super that was working on this shop told me, he says, you might consider upgrading the service on those plugs. He said, if you're running drills or saws or anything of that nature, you don't want to ever have any problems with the circuit breaker flipping or exceeding the amperage of the circuit. He said go from 15 amp, which is your standard, to 20 amp. And so that's what I did. It wasn't, I don't think it was any more expensive. It might have been $100 total to go to that extra service. So we did do 20 amp service on all the plugs in the shop. And as far as how the wires were actually ran, as long as they got them to the switches the way that I wanted them laid out, I wasn't too concerned. However, remember, we did floor the attic for storage space. And so when they were running the wires across the attic, sometimes you'll see an electrician, they'll just take the shortest path and just come straight across all the, we'll call them floor studs or floor joists because they're in the attic, but really they're ceiling studs, I guess. But they'll go across the top of those, and when you try to put your plywood down for your floor, it's trying to lay on top of those wires, and it makes it uneven, and you have to end up notching the stud by chance or something like that to get the set flush. So what I asked them to do, and what the super on the build asked them to do, is they ran all the wires inside the trusses straight down each side. So there's like a wire bundle, and they run down each side of the shop, and then they drop down the wall, obviously where they need to be, but where the lights are, they came into the trough where the insulation would be, and they came in right at the edge of the wall, or at the edge of the ceiling, right at the edge. And so they come down, and then they come straight across the stud, we'll call it, in the ceiling, to get to where the lights are. And what that did is that kept the entire surface area of the floor free from any wiring, so we didn't have any problems putting the plywood down when we floored the attic. And finally, I did do some large amperage plugs, which I mentioned before. This one at the front of the shop on the right-hand side is actually a 50 amp, and I did that in case I ever wanted to put a welder in here. I've got something, I don't even know if you can plug a welder into something that big, but it's there, the wiring is there, so even if we had to direct wire it, I can figure that out, but it's there and ready when I need it. We also did a 30 amp for the lift, and you'll see here, when they actually put the box in, even though the builder wrote on the stud to put it up high, they actually put the box down low. They actually had to come back and fix that. So there it is corrected. You can see it now, it's up close to the top. And if we ever put a lift in here, we've got provisions to do a 2-post or 4-post. I'll probably do a 2-post if I ever did do it. But that's where it would plug in. And if it had to be direct wired, I could just run the wire over, take the box out. And obviously I wouldn't, I'd have the electrician do it, but they would wire into the box that was there. But I wanted the wiring to be there already for it. That way we wouldn't have any trouble. And we did the same thing in the compressor closet. You know, we did the 30 amp that I already talked about in there. And then the illuminated switch had to be special ordered to go with that, that amperage for that plug. So think about that too. Any large 220 volt plugs that you want to have, make sure you get them all in place now, because now's the time to do it. It doesn't cost hardly anything to add them as you're having the shop built versus, oh crap, I forgot something. Now I've got to come back and add a large amperage plug for something, and they're trying to fish through the wall and go back over to your circuit breaker box, and I have to change out the circuit breaker box for a larger one or something of that, you know, something like that. So try to think of all this stuff. I figured that would be the most I would ever need to use, and so we stopped with just the 3. I think I'll take that back. There's a 4th one that we did put in for the mini split. So that's a 30 amp as well. So there were 4 total that I put in this shop. And one other thing to think about is your door opener. Now, you guys remember I mentioned I was going to use a jack shaft opener to prevent having anything going across the ceiling and try to have it nice and compact. So there it is up there in the corner, and you'll see we did have to do a plug in the ceiling for the garage door opener to make it nice and clean on the install. So think about stuff like that too. Where's your opener going to be and where is it going to plug in? That's how we did this one. And finally, think about any entertainment. So I knew I wanted to have a TV out here, probably a sound bar, internet for sure. And so we've actually got plugs behind the TV up there. You can't really see them. I'll try to show you, but I doubt you can see much. Yeah, you really can't see them that well. But there's a 2-gang plug back there. There's gonna be plenty of ports. I know it's gonna have the TV would take one, the sound bar would take one, the Wi-Fi router would take one, and then whatever else I happen to need to plug in up there. So there's a 2-gang, which means 4 plugs behind the TV. And there's also the low voltage. So be thinking about that too. And low voltage might be pretty important. It was for me. And so I'll talk about that next. So your low voltage is going to be stuff like your internet connection, your coax for TV or something like that. Don't forget your garage door opener actually might have some low voltage. Some of them are wireless now, but we did run a line so that in case it wasn't wireless, it would have a connection for the garage door opener. The alarm system. So I knew I was going to have an alarm in here. And so the electricians for the builder came out and did the plugs and the breaker box and all of this. The alarm company guy came out and actually ran the wiring for the alarm. Make sure you let them know. I had to schedule that before, obviously the sheetrock went up, but even before the insulation went in. So wanted to make sure I had all the low voltage ran. And there's a controller here. There's the siren up there. I want to make sure it was out of arm's reach. If somebody broke into here, they couldn't just knock it off with a bat. So the siren's up there. It's got sensors all over the place. A lot of the newer alarms are wireless. I don't know how long the batteries last now, but back when I built the shop, they didn't last that long, and I didn't want to be all the time changing batteries out. And so all of the alarm system stuff is hardwired. You can see the wires come up and there's our contacts. And so the whole thing's hardwired, and it's even tied back into the house alarm so I can arm it or disarm it from the house. It's like the master or whatever. And then there's obviously a keypad over here in the shop too. When I come in the door, you guys have probably seen, if you watch my videos a while, seen me turn the alarm off. So think about low voltage in terms of your alarm system. If you want to have any security cameras, a lot of those will be low voltage, Cat 5 type cable. Internet already mentioned, I think, and satellite or cable TV or something like that. So I made sure all that was run before the sheetrock and the insulation went in. And I actually even had them run, I think, 2 or 3 extra low voltage wires, and they're just tied off in the attic in case something comes out in the future that I want to make use of. I tried to think ahead a little bit and somewhat future-proof the shop. And some folks may be wondering, like, what did it cost to run the low voltage since it was separate from the electrical that the builder was going to do? Well, the alarm company, I think, charged me a $50 trip fee. And so they had to put in a new box, which was all included with my service, which isn't that expensive, to be honest. So because I already had a monitored alarm, they didn't charge me any extra to add the shop to the agreement. 0 change in a monthly fee. They charged me a $50 trip fee to come out and run the wiring, so pretty cheap there. And then I had a guy who does kind of low voltage wiring on the side. I tried to ask around when I knew I was going to have something like this done. The builder, obviously, they're going to charge you some crazy, flat rate or whatever to come run low voltage. So I found a guy that charged basically $20 a wire. And so I had him run the coax for the satellite TV. I had him run 5 Cat 5s. So 120 bucks he charged me to run all the low voltage wiring that I needed. Like I said, it was 50 bucks for the alarm company to come and do theirs. So not much money at all, and well worth it. So try to ask around when you're going to have something like this done. All you need is somebody who knows how to fish wire. And the guy basically I had the builder put a pipe in from the house to the shop, because we knew we were going to be running some low voltage wiring through it. And so when they were doing all of the excavation and all of that, they put a plastic underground pipe that basically makes a big U, and all the wiring comes up and comes in to this box right here. So keep that in mind too if you're close enough to your home like I was to extend things. If you're not close enough, you probably have to do a separate system, but your internet and all that, you can get repeaters and all of that, and so it's not that big a deal just to get your wireless extended to meet the distance to your shop if it's not too far from your home. So that's really it for electrical. And the builder had done an awesome job. I had a really good super, and I mentioned this before, they were doing phenomenal work. Everything was going quickly now until we got to electrical. And unfortunately, I don't know what it was with the electricians, but it was literally like if I asked them to do something, they would do the opposite. And I'm not kidding. And so when I first came in, I would double check everything. I would come in after they ran some wires, and luckily I could trace and look. So make sure you kind of double check things. It's trust but verify, I guess. And thank goodness in this case that I did, because I left them literally would hang a piece of paper right by this where this switch box was going to go, telling them exactly what I wanted each switch to do. They just ran the wires any kind of way. And when I caught it, luckily there was enough slack in there that they were able to come and pull some staples and move the wires around to make it all work. But had I not caught it, it'd be just some random switch. And they kind of acted funny about it when I asked them. I'm like, guys, these aren't right. And the guy looked at me and says, what does it matter? And I'm like, well, when you're going to come in a shop at night, I don't have to remember the third switch happens to turn on the front half of the shop, and the first switch turns on the outside lights or something crazy like that. I said, I want to know that this is the front half, this is the back half, this is the fan, this is the light, and this is the air compressor. Same thing up front. I left them exactly the way I wanted them wired up, and it wouldn't take them another minute or two to reference the sheet and make sure that the actual wires go to where they're supposed to go. That was a problem that I had. I also wanted the can lights outside. I think I showed you those last time, but I'll leave a picture here so you can see what I'm talking about. I wanted those to come on dusk to dawn. And so I had them put in a sensor, and I'll show you that. Hopefully we can see it at night. So there's the sensor that's mounted outside, and it's a solar sensor, I guess. And when the sun hits it, it turns off the lights. Well, they wired it straight to that. So the can lights, I'll go ahead and show them to you since we're outside. The can lights that are on up there, they're wired, or were wired straight to that. And what I had the hardest time getting the electrician to understand is I kept saying, well, what if I want to turn them off? Like, what if it's, I want it to just be dark. I don't want any lights on for whatever reason. I want to turn the can lights off. And he kept saying, that's the switch pointing at the photo cell, I think is what it's called. And I finally said, well, can I wire a switch to the photo cell to turn that off? And he was like, oh yeah, we can do that. And so I don't know what his deal was, but this switch right here basically turns the photo cell off, which in turn will turn the can lights off. Otherwise, they would have been on all the time no matter what. You wouldn't have had an option to actually turn them off. And so keep that in mind too. When you're working with your electrician, make sure they understand exactly what you want. And if it's not what you want, make them change it. The lights, when I did the computer program, it laid them out in a specific pattern. Now, I don't know 100% if that would have mattered. Since I wanted them laid out the way the computer program said to lay them out, I drew them that way, and I left the electrician a picture. This is how I want the lights to be. Well, they literally mounted the lights 90 degrees the other direction. Now, it might not have mattered, like I said, but I didn't know if it would or not. I knew the computer system was figuring out the light output that I needed, and so I had them come back and they had to change them all. The guy was kind of aggravated about it, but I'm like, I left a picture, man. I drew it and hung it on the wall, and I even talked to the guy before I left. Came in, they were literally, every single one of them was turned 90 degrees. So that was really the only during the whole build, the only contention point I had with any of the contractors, and I just worked through the super. I just called him up and said, this stuff isn't right, they're gonna have to fix it. And he had them come back out and take care of it, but that was a little bit of a headache. And yes, we finally got the new workbench organized. You see there's no more junk laying all over it. We got the pegboard set up like we want it. The only thing I wish it had, very happy with this workbench, the only thing I wish it had was a strip light for like a task light. So what I'm gonna do is pick up probably a 36-inch LED strip light, and I'll just JB weld some magnets or something on the back of it so I can move it around if I want to. And we'll just magnetize it to here, put the power cord over the back, and plug it into one of the wall plugs in the back. But finally got that organized and all set up. I do still need some suggestions on a bench vise. You know, I was looking at that Irwin or the Yoast 750E. I want to keep it to like a 5-inch. I don't want anything too big to take up too much space on the workbench, but I am going to be picking up a bench vise very soon. If you have a recommendation on one, please leave me a comment below. Several people said the Irwin is actually pretty good, the Irwin that I've been looking at. Some people said the Yoast is actually very good, and then I got a few other recommendations for vices that were a little bit bigger, but I think I want to keep it to like a 5-inch based on what, historically I've used one for. So budget is $200, and I want to keep the vise to, 5-6 inches tops. If you have a recommendation, leave me a comment below. So that's a pretty good stopping point. That pretty much covers all of electrical. Be sure to leave me some comments and questions below. As always, I'll go back and answer those in the next installment of the Shop Build series. Be sure to give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. I appreciate you guys that do that. It helps them get more views and helps them get out into the YouTube algorithm. Also, be sure to hit subscribe if you haven't already, and the notification bell. I had a couple people email me and say, hey, I'm not getting notified when you publish new content. And I think it might have been because they forgot to hit that notification bell. It'll actually send you a little alert when the new videos are published. So don't forget to do that. Check us out on Instagram. It's @Speedys_garage, as well as our website, www.speedysgarage.net. Be sure to tune in next time to see what's next for the Shop Build, and hopefully I'll see you out there.